Kana Hapnapi relatives, Membiwa Tuhushka Opi Miha. Welcome back to Iconic American Indian, the podcast. I'm your host, Opi Miha. Hope everyone is doing well on this Thursday, December 31st, 2020. So this is it for 2020. We're going into the new year, so, it's time to get back to business, time to get back to work, time to elevate even higher. All right, y'all. So today I wanted to get into the second part of the Pawnee Diaspora. So let me go ahead and pull that up. And we'll go ahead and begin. It says Carlson, Part 2, the Saponi Diaspora. Speaking of March 1729, Carlson writes, most of the Saponi were still at Christanna in June, although some families had already left to join the Catawba and or other Tutelo, now living far from the Christanna reservation. One of the main reasons that the Saponi left Christanna was the hanging of the Saponi elder. A drunken Saponi leader had earlier killed an Englishman. Carlson states the Saponis took this so much to heart that soon after quitted their settlement and moved in a body of the Catawbas. And here pretty soon I'm going to be getting into a reading of genealogy. It's called Catawba Genealogy, done by Ian Watson. So stay tuned for that as well. That's to come here in 2021. It says by late in the summer of 1729, the Saponi and confederated bands and families that remained with them finally departed the Christanna reservation. This abandonment of the reservation began a diaspora of the people that once resided there. Comments later made by John Mitchell in 1755 stated that in 1729, both the Saponi and the Tutelo had removed further south upon the heads of the Pedi at the northern end of what was known as Catawba territory. Bird also noted that the Saponi removed to Catawba territory that year. He explained that this people is now made up of the remnant of several other nations, of which the most considerable are the Saponis, the Occaneechees, and the Stuckenhawks or Stuckanucks, were not finding themselves separately numerous enough for their defense, have agreed to unite into one body, and all of them now go under the name of the Saponi. A French map published late in 1729 reveals that one faction labeled the Saponi Nahisan had removed far west from the extent of settlement far up the headwaters of the Roanoke River. Speaking of the Tutelo, Carlson says they wandered up and down the Appalachians until by 1740 they joined their old enemies, the Iroquois. In 1730, the Catawba and Saponi living with them asked to make a treaty with Virginia. Nothing came of it. In 1732, Byrd, speaking of the Catawba, said their population of more than 400 fighting men was spread throughout 6 towns on the Santee River in Carolina along a 20-mile stretch. It goes on to say, since the Saponi had abandoned their homes at Fort Christanna, the state of Virginia assumes they have abandoned it. By the winter of 1730, the Virginia Council decided to sell off the reservation. Carlson finds only one reference to the Saponi found in the Carolinas on Catawba lands. He speaks of the Tuscarora harassing a small band of settlement Indians. By 1732, the Saponi living with the Catawba decided to leave them. The Saponi Indians asked the state of Virginia if they could return, and also asked if the Sara or the Churwa could come with them. The Virginians agreed to this and promised them an equal amount of land that they had lost at Christanna, so long as it was not settled, either on the Roanoke or the Appomattox rivers. They built a fort near their old haunts near Fort Christanna. Carlson goes on to say that there was immediately tension as before between the Saponi and the Nottoway. So we see this quite often here, so this is very interesting. The Tuscarora, the Nottoway, and the Five Nations, Iroquois, continually attacked the Saponi. Eventually, the Virginians sided with the Saponi, and eventually local militias in Virginia helped subside the tensions between the rival groups. Even King Blunt of the Tuscarora, attempting to mediate an end to the war, asked the Saponi to join him. There is no record of a response from the Saponi. It appears the Saponi abandoned their fort in Brunswick County and are not found again in historical documents by Carlson until 1735. It says 2 bands of the Saponi and Tutelo are found in the mountains of North Carolina, Carlson says. One era map also shows that a band of the Occaneechi had split off from the main body of the Saponi, and by 1733 were living off the trading path where it has crossed the Eno or the Flat River in North Carolina. Bricknell's 1737 publication reported that in the year 1735 and or 36, the band of Saponi closely associated with the Catawbas was located on the Clarendon River in the west branch of the Cape Fear River in North Carolina. The Saponi village was some 5 or 6 days over the mountains, far removed from colonial settlements. Bricknell also mentions that the Totara then had a village somewhere nearby this Saponi town, although deeper into the mountains. Of the people of these 2 villages, Bricknell wrote, they usually do not make visits amongst us except to be their traders, who bring us their skins and furs. Alright, keep it moving. Carlson continues on the documentary trail of the Saponi. The next reference Carlson discovers is in 1737, where there is a reference to Saponi cabins. So, just wanted to show you guys the Saponi cabins. Wanagi actually did a video on this, so here's the video if you guys want to go back and check it out. It's called Saponi Indian Cabins in 1737 in Contemporary Tribal Communities. And I just want to read a little bit of information about the Saponi cabins. So this is off of Native American roots. Much credit to them. They have a lot of the Siouan history here. Saponi, Catawba, different families that we actually have gone over in our family histories. So I'm going to read a little bit here. It says Saponi Indian cabins in 1737 in contemporary tribal communities. So this is what we were just reading about on the other document that we'll go back to in just a moment. On November 8, 1737, a land deed recorded in Amelia County, Virginia, contains a report of Saponi Indian cabins. So this historical record is quite significant because it documents a very specific date and location of Saponi people. Throughout the 1700s, documented sightings of Saponi people continued to diminish. So any and every reference to the Saponi is important in tracking their location. In a previous blog post, the writer says, I discussed the multiple reports of Saponi Indians in Granville County, living next to Indian trader Colonel William Eaton in the 1750s, 1760s, and I proposed that this was the foundation of the Native American community in Granville. If you have not already read the blog post, I strongly suggest you do to make a better sense of the content here. In this blog entry, I will look to see if any of Granville's Native American families and nearby tribal communities can be tied to this record of Saponi Indian cabins in Amelia County. All right, so let's get back to the reading here. All right, it says, so we were on the Saponi cabins that appear to still be inhabited in Amelia County, Virginia, which is what the last thing was talking about. The Saponi community was located on a branch of the Winningham Creek, a tributary to the Appomattox River. This was near a former trading post run by Colonel John Bowling. Carlson states that although there is no longer a trading post in the area, the Bowling family was still in the area. He states that both Bowling and the Saponi were friends to Colonel Mumford. Recall that earlier the Saponi were offered lands near this area, but there is no record, according to Carlson, of them receiving the lands. It is here that Carlson starts referring to the Christanna band of the Saponi. So I know that says Christian band, but it's Christanna. Carlson next referenced by 1738, a Christanna band of the Saponi had established a new village a little further north of the personal lands of the now ex-governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, who had retired upon his plantation in neighboring Spotsylvania County. Apparently, the band had gained permission from him to reside at Fox Neck of the Rapidan River in Orange County, not far from Old Fort Germanna. This Christanna band of the Saponi would be able to maintain residence here for some time in the company of their old benefactor. It says from 1738 on, the Orange County court record mentions various petitions from Alexander McCartan, John Suwana, John Collins, John Bowling, and others, all of whom are described there is specifically as Christanna Saponi Indians. Carlson notes one change. Whereas the Saponi had been considered tributary Indians before they left Fort Christanna, this distinction no longer applied afterwards. He says, page 101 and 102, with respect to these Christanna Saponi, the Saponi were no longer treated as members of a tributary nation, but more fully as citizen Indians by the Virginians. There were to be consequences to this. After the death of their old advocate ex-governor Alexander Spotswood in 1740, complaints against Christanna Saponi began being forwarded to the county authorities by local settlers. All right, give me just one moment. Relatives, I'm gonna grab a quick drink. All right, we're back. In 1740, a local farmer named William Bohannon complained that 26 of the Indians who inhabit Fox Neck were firing the woods. He also accused them of killing some of his free-ranging pigs. He said he had lost more pigs than usual since the coming of the Indians. He says the Indians were being called into court and were being accused of doing mischief. The following year, Bohannon came again to Orange County officials complaining that he thought the Indians had shot at him. Then Carlson adds, the band's troubles would climax in the winter of 1743 when a number of Saponi men had their guns seized and found themselves arrested. The Saponi men named John Collins, Alex McCartan, John Bowling, Craft Tom, Blind Tom, Foolish Jack, Charles Griffin, Little Jack, Isaac, and Harvey were taken before the Orange County Court for trial by precept under the hands of the seals of William Russell and Ed Spencer, gentlemen, under the charges of stealing hogs, burning the woods, and terrifying one Lawrence Struthers. Struthers had even claimed that he was shot at and then chased by the Saponi in the backwoods. The Saponi men were ordered held in jail until bonded, after which they were ordered to leave the county. Interestingly, several white men sympathetic to the Saponi predicament went security on their bail bonds, after which they were released and openly declared their intentions to depart the county within a week, at which time their guns would be returned. All right, moving on. Carlson continues. Late in the summer of 1743, Governor Gooch of Virginia reported that the Saponis and other petty nations associated with them had left Virginia and were again residing in the Carolinas with the Catawba. Carlson reports that while some Saponi would forever remain with the Catawba, this Christian band or Christanna band of Saponi would separate from them. He speaks of three Saponi bands that he describes as the Tutelo Saponi, the Catawba Saponi, and this Christanna band of the Saponi. He will eventually link this Christanna band with those later termed Melungeons. All right, so we can kind of see with that statement where these Saponi Indians end up. Okay. So if you know or have heard anything about Melungeons, you kind of know the area where they kind of come from. All right. The Christanna band of the Saponi, according to Carlson, had its start at Fort Christanna. Most of the Saponi were not responsive to the efforts on behalf of Governor Spotswood's school for the Saponi. A part of that education was an attempt to turn the heathen into Christians, but it appears that the schoolmaster Griffin had an effect on a few of the Indians. They must have converted to Christianity. Carlson asked us to recall an incident he described in 1728. He had, page 102, mentioned a record where certain Saponis informed the Virginians that the Tutelo chief and other Saponi were considering taking the colonists to war with the aid of the Catawba. They wanted vengeance over the hanging of three Saponi by the colonists. Were these informants the Christian Saponi or Christanna Saponi? We will never know. All right. Carlson speaks of the two other bands. One went to live with the Catawba, and the third later, called the Tutelo, who went north to live with Six Nations. This third band went to live in the vicinity of ex-Governor Spotswood at a place called Fox Neck. Carlson says, the Orange County records also confirmed that no interpreter was ever required in dealing with the Christanna band when they found themselves in court. It also shows that the old policy observed by Reverend Fontana for Christanna less than 3 decades earlier was no longer enforced amongst the Christanna Saponi. Fontana had maintained that the Saponi required interpreters, and their elders always spoke in their own language, even if they could speak English in their dealings with colonial officials. Carlson continues, the Christanna band of the Saponi had established an identity distinct and separate from the Catawba Saponi or the Tutelo Saponi refugees to the Iroquois country from at least 1738 onward. Carlson states that from the late 1730s until the Revolutionary War, that only those families associated with the Orange County Saponi are referred to in the records as Christian Saponi. Orange County records from 1738 to 1743 refer to several Saponi living in the area. They include Alex McCartan, John Collins, John Bowling, Charles Griffin, and other Christian Indians. The following names are also mentioned: Manancasa, Foolish Jack, Little Jack, Isaac Harry, Captain Tom, and Blind Tom. Charles Griffin appears to have taken his name from Reverend Griffin, a former school teacher at the Fort Christanna School. Captain Joseph Collins negotiated the release of Suwana from the French Indians in 1722. Carlson speculated that McCartan surname may have evolved into McCarty and McCarta, surnames associated with the Collinses in the next century. Carlson speculates, page 107, evidence available from written records made subsequent to 1743. It is quite possible to surmise that John Collins is the son of Captain Tom, for an elder named Tom Collins is shown living with John and the rest of the Christanna Saponi in the years immediately following their expulsion from Orange County. If this is so, one might further speculate that Blind Tom is Tom's father. All right. Carlson suspects the Bowling surname came amongst the Christanna band of the Saponi in the 1730s while living in Amelia County. The well-known Powhatan mixed blood family had for generations operated a trading house at the falls of the Appomattox, or Appomattox. Pearl Carlton, exactly when and how the treaty obligations stemming from the 1677 and the subsequent agreements with the Saponi were abolished, ignored, or forgotten by Virginia authorities is not known. After 1733, no mention of the colony recognizing any treaty obligation to the Saponi appears in Virginia records. Regardless, by at least 1738, the Christanna Saponi were being treated as individual citizen Indians as opposed to political entity of tributary Indians. So if you guys are wondering about this tributary and different things like that, just search the etymology on it and you'll see what it means. This is Carlton says in 1743, the Christanna Saponi went south to live near Catawba lands. However, by in 1745, they were back in Virginia and in Louisa County, near to their former lands in Orange County, in the mountains south of Rapidan Station. The Christanna Saponi would reside in the area for some time and would be noted as Nasan, Saponi for the people. In 1749-1750 era maps, names listed living in the area are Sam and William Collins, along men named George and Thomas Gibson, Sam Bunch, Ben Branham, and a few others were charged with by Louisa County Court for concealing tithables. All right, we all know the deal on the tithable thing. On page 112, the likely source for the charge was Virginia law that stipulated that in addition to all adult males, all Indian, Negro, and mulatto women over 16 years of age were also tithable, unlike white women of the same age. The Christanna Saponi may have felt that they should be free from taxation, a rightful heirs of the tributary nation. But as far as the Virginia government was concerned, tributary status no longer applied. This being the case, they would now have to be subject to the Virginia Act of May 1723. The act stipulated that all free Negroes, mulattoes, Indians, except tributary Indians to this government, male and female above 16 years, and all wives of such Negroes, mulattoes, or Indians, except Indians tributary to this government, shall be accounted tithable. Social and economical barriers based on the race labels would become a greater concern for these Christanna Indians now that they had lost their political status as tributary Indians. All right, so we're getting towards the end here. We have followed the documentation of the Saponi Indians from 1729 to 1743, the presence among them of a Charlie Griffin ties them back to old Fort Christanna and the teacher Reverend Griffin. Once they left Christanna, they lived for a time with the Catawba and for a time with former Governor Spotswood, They wandered like the Hebrew of old in search of new homes, with tribal unity disappearing. As a few remote families are gradually being absorbed into the frontier lifestyle of their white neighbors, in 1743 families again started to return to the Catawba. They simply didn't know where to go or what to do. The next section covers a time frame with these Christanna Saponi Indians became known more commonly as Melungeons. So that's the end of the second part of the Saponi Diaspora. So the next parts that we're going to be getting into is going to be the mentioning of Melungeon. So this will be part 3. So it'll be from Saponi to Melungeon. The first part of that. So it's actually part 3 of the Carlson Saponi Diaspora. So I did want to say in this reading that, I'm just, trying to give you some background and history of the ancestors that I'm tied to, and, where they went and how you see the gradual things that are starting to happen throughout history with them losing their tribal identity, who they were, being classified under, being Negroes and mulattoes and all that other stuff. So that's starting to happen as you see as we go through the time, the timelines here. I did want to say that I want everybody, when you get a chance, to get over to, if you are subscribed to me, and I did post this, to get over to the American Prep and Survival channel. We need to get that up to 1,000 subscribers so that we can do live streams and different things like that. So I would like to start showing you guys some of the survival products that I have as well. A New Breed is actually doing an awesome job showing, different survival and prep things. So I would kind of like to start getting into the same kind of talk with you guys, get him and Kudameo and different people on to talk about this as well. Also, if you guys haven't had a chance, get over to the website, iconicamerikanindian.com. So all these links and websites, different things, I will have in the description of the video. So I'll have those links. Again, I know 2020 was rough for everyone, but we're going into 2021 and it's time to get down to business. So I will see you guys on the other side, stronger, better than ever, and one love.
Kana hop nappy relatives and biwa pahushka obi miha Obi miha.
This is a dangerous group that we're dealing with now.
That's the hijack again. Kana hop nappy relatives. They had no idea their ancestors had been free.
Audi miha. Audi miha. Audi miha. Audi miha. Audi miha. Audi miha.
They had no idea their ancestors had been free.
Audi miha. Audi miha. Audi miha. Audi miha.
That's the hijack again.